Many of us know about the story of Johnny Manziel. Johnny Football was one of the most popular quarterbacks to have ever played. It could be argued that no one since him has been able to take over college football quite like he did. All eyes at one point were on Johnny Manziel, whether good, whether bad. Johnny Football, of course, was drafted by the Cleveland Browns, but unfortunately, due to off-the-field demons, he can never fully exercise his abilities on the field. That's what most people will jump to. You know, he had so many off-the-field issues. That's why it didn't pan out. But I'm curious to know just how deep it went. Today, we're going to talk about the career and journey, and I'd argue even the redemption of Johnny Football, Johnny Manziel. What it do, baby? It's Triple DS. Thank you guys so much for tuning in once again. Thank you guys for being so patient for this video. I have been doing so much research on this, and my goodness, this guy's story is absolutely insane. It's crazy for me to think that this guy was the head of the table, if you guys get that reference, in college at one point. He took over college. He took it by storm. When you look at it on surface, from where Johnny is now to where Johnny was 7 years ago, you'd think this guy had fallen off a cliff, and to an extent you might be right. As you will see in this story, where he's at now is actually a huge step up if you take a step back and look at it beyond the world of football. This guy definitely has exercised many demons in his life, and you could argue that he is in a way better place than he had ever been. That includes being in college. That includes being on the Cleveland Browns. So guys, stick around. Hope you guys enjoy something, and if this is your first time on the channel, feel free to smash the subscribe button. We are on the road to 1250 subs. Thank you guys for the support. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into it. Johnny Manziel was born on December 6, 1992 to his parents Paul and Michelle Manziel. Unlike most players who had to claw their way to get to where they're at, Johnny's story is a little bit different. Johnny, of Lebanese descent, his great-grandfather struck oil in Texas on 10 separate fields, making the Manziel family rather wealthy. Now, if you know anything about money, you know too much money can bring out the worst in some people. With this tremendous wealth, Johnny's family has been able to thrive through generation after generation after generation, and most likely will follow suit even long after we're all gone. Some people know how to handle riches, while others can't really figure it out. Johnny's grandfather, suspected DUI, was also charged with bribery. Johnny's father's cousin, Bobby Joe Manziel, is one of the more notorious family members here, as he has been arrested on multiple occasions, imprisoned, and don't think that he hasn't had his share of wealth in his family. As a freshman, he actually played wide receiver in high school, and it wasn't until halfway into his sophomore season where he actually became the starting quarterback from here on out. Johnny's sophomore stats are honestly all over the place. He threw for over 1,100 yards passing, ran the ball for over 800 yards, and had over 400 receiving yards, to have a total of 28 touchdowns among all three categories. Pretty good. It does show his versatility very early on, but it's not until his junior year and senior year that things really start kicking off. We are in the heart of Texas football, and if you guys know about this environment, you know them high school Friday night light games are some of the most fun environments to be in. It's so exciting. The atmosphere is crazy. You combine that with Johnny Manziel's charisma, his likable attitude, and the fact that he throws it down when it comes to on-the-field activities. In his junior year, he took off, throwing for over 2,900 yards passing, ran the ball for over 1,500 yards. Guys, that is absolutely insane. I just need to take a moment for that. 1,500 yards rushing and almost 3,000 yards passing. But get this, he had a total of 55 touchdowns, 33 of which came on the ground running the ball. It's absolutely insane what this guy was doing. Yet in his senior year, he got even better. When the lights were shining bright on Friday nights, when all eyes were on Manziel, the bleachers were all packed with fans, family, Johnny showed why he deserved to be Mr. Texas football. He throws for over 3,600 yards passing, runs for another 1,600 yards. He runs for 30 more touchdowns, and throws for 45 touchdowns, meaning he has 75 touchdowns in total. In his senior year, he did win the aforementioned Mr. Texas Football Award. He was rated the #1 quarterback by Dave Campbell's Texas Football. He was rated a 3-star recruit by Rivals.com, and ESPN ranked him a 78 out of 100 prospect. Johnny originally committed to Oregon, but was persuaded to go to Texas A&M. Texas A&M's quarterback at this point is Ryan Tannehill, who is in his final year until he goes to the NFL, so Johnny does redshirt for the 2011 campaign. It isn't until the end of the 2011 season where things start to change for Johnny Manziel. This was one of his first big problems he faced in terms of off-the-field issues. Prior to the 2012 season, Johnny was arrested for disorderly conduct, failure to produce ID, and possession of a fake driver's license. This all started when a friend of Johnny's, who he was with at the time, started throwing racial slurs literally at just a stranger. The stranger wasn't taking that, so he started confronting the friend. Johnny, although he was initially trying to break it up, ended up being involved in the fight that led to officers intervening and subsequently realizing Johnny had a fake driver's license. It was reported that Johnny spent that night in jail and was out the very next day. As far as the school was concerned, Johnny's punishment was that he had to do sprints before and after every single practice. Obviously, Texas A&M wasn't thrilled that Johnny got into this trouble. It was unnecessary attention for the school. Yet, despite punishments and all, Johnny impressed so much that he was named the starter for the 2012 season. Johnny's career was relatively quiet until his game against Arkansas, where he broke the single season passing record with 557 yards. He breaks that very same record 2 games later with 576 passing yards. At this point, all eyes are on Johnny. Who is this freshman dominating college the way he's doing it right now? Ladies and gentlemen, Johnny football was here against #1 ranked Alabama. This is Johnny's chance to show what he's made of, and he absolutely delivers. The pressure is nothing for this guy. He threw 24 of 31 passes, 253 yards, 2 touchdowns to no interceptions, 67 rush yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. Despite playing the fearsome #1 Alabama, Johnny remained cool, calm, and collected. And one thing that I want to emphasize in all of this is that throughout all of these games, it's not like this guy is necessarily going home and studying. This guy is going out and partying damn near every single night. So it does make you realize where this guy was at the time. Like, this guy clearly is living, I'd argue, a double life, and he is absolutely killing it. Johnny's freshman stats for the year were 3,700 yards passing, 26 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, 1,400 yards rushing, and 21 rushing touchdowns. He broke the SEC record for season total yards, which was 5,116. He was named SEC Freshman of the Year and SEC Player of the Year. He was the first ever freshman to win the Davey O'Brien Award and Manning Award recipient. He is also the only freshman to win the Heisman Trophy Award. This stat is something I found absolutely insane as well. Johnny Manziel was #1 in SEC in terms of rushing yards, outrunning the likes of Eddie Lacy, TJ Yeldon, and a young, no arthritis knees Todd Gurley. Johnny also breaks the Cotton Bowl record for most total yards at 516, and he breaks an All Bowl record for most rushing yards for a quarterback at 229, and to this day stands. So despite his party life already existing, he is still maintaining what he's doing in football. But this is where Johnny's party life starts to kind of get in the way of his career. Prior to the start of the sophomore season, Johnny was invited to the prestigious Manning Academy. On the first 2 days, he shows up late. On the 3rd day, he absolutely flat out no-shows. The reason given that Johnny did not show up for that 3rd day was that he was dealing with an illness. However, it was reported and tweeted that Johnny was at a hookah bar the night prior. So a lot of people speculated his illness was really him just being hungover. It does show Johnny's unprofessional side, and it does show, honestly, the beginning of what's to come with Johnny versus the nightlife. The Manning Academy did kick Johnny Manziel out from being a counselor. A month later, a scandal surfaced that he was signing autographs for money. Not enough evidence to get him into any real trouble, so they could only suspend him for half a game in week 1. Sometime later, he also attends a frat party at Texas, but ultimately gets thrown out of that. Now, that itself isn't necessarily a big deal per se, but to get thrown out of a frat party is, when you think about it, everyone's drunk. How out of control do you have to be at a frat party for you to get thrown out? This guy at 19, 20 years old is on top of the world. Of course he's gonna make mistakes, man. It happens. He's just a kid. So a lot of this stuff is still kind of getting brushed to the side. Johnny, in some ways, is getting away with it. He's getting away with it. For his sophomore year, although Johnny did look fantastic, it was nothing like his freshman year. And that's not a knock to his sophomore campaign at all. He threw for over 4,000 yards passing, ran for another 750 yards, and ran for 9 rushing touchdowns. In the Chick-fil-A Bowl, he was named Offensive MVP. He was also named the SEC Male Athlete of the Year. He still played well enough where a lot of scouts in the NFL were still touting him as one of the highest prospects to come into the league. He was still considered a first-round selection. Although more or less he did stay out of trouble during the season, it didn't mean that his party life would stop. He's hanging out and partying with the likes of Drake. So don't get it twisted. Johnny is still being Johnny party life. After his sophomore campaign, Johnny does elect to go into the NFL draft. So this is the part in the story where I do like to talk about the team that drafts him, what they were doing the year prior. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the Cleveland Browns of the 2013 season. The Cleveland Browns, led by new owner Jimmy Haslam, new GM in Michael Lombardi, and new head coach Rob Shazinski, actually started off the year okay. They were 3-2, only to finish 1-10 down the line. The quarterback room was led by fan favorite Brian Hoyer, along with a couple of first-round draft pick busts in Jason Campbell and Brandon Weeden. Hoyer particularly is interesting because at this point, he is around the 20th quarterback playing for the Cleveland Browns. He's like the 20th starter since Tim Couch back in '99. Despite it being the first year for both head coach and GM, the decision was made to fire both of them after 1 year. In comes Mike Pettin as head coach for the 2014 season. Because of the Richardson trade, the Browns did hold 2 first-round picks, and clearly they were looking for a quarterback. At the combine, Johnny measures at 5'11", 207 pounds, so a relatively small statured quarterback. Johnny ran a 4.68 at the 40-yard dash and does not throw at the combine, but he said he would throw at his pro day. So let's talk about his pro day. At his pro day, scouts were saying that his footwork looked good and connected on nearly every deep throw, going 61 of 64 in total throws, and that includes 1 drop by his receivers. At this point, the risk of drafting Manziel is obvious. Off the field, he has a lot of issues coming in, and on the field, he is a small statured quarterback. But the consensus in Johnny's favor was that he is too damn box office, too damn talented, and too damn athletic to not be a first-round pick. With all the talent that is in the 2014 draft, look guys, let me take a second. This is a stacked 2014 draft. Yeah, you got your Blake Bortles in here, but you still have Jadeveon Clowney, Aaron Donald, Khalil Mack, Zach Martin, Derek Carr, Devontae Adams, OBJ, and other QBs such as Teddy Bridgewater. The fact that among all of this talent, Johnny is still considered a first-round talent just goes to show you what his skills were on the field. This guy was absolutely amazing. Cleveland held the 26th overall draft pick, but they knew Johnny was their guy. They were convinced at this point. So they did trade up with the Eagles and selected Johnny Manziel, 22nd overall. And here we go. Johnny Manziel, Johnny Football is in the National Football League. What is gonna happen next? Well, he gets fined almost immediately, as in the preseason game against Washington, he is fined for flipping the bird at the fans and at the players. A lot of people and coaches felt like Johnny wasn't quite ready to be a starting quarterback in the league, so he would take a step back and play behind Brian Hoyer. Johnny Manziel doesn't play until week 13 when Hoyer does inevitably get benched, and he plays okay. Considering the time he's given, he plays okay, going 5 of 8, 63 yards, and he did have a rushing touchdown. In week 15 against the Cincinnati Bengals, all eyes are on this game. You know why? Because this is finally the starting debut of Johnny Manziel. What is he going to do against a playoff contender in the Cincinnati Bengals? And let me tell you guys, to my own enjoyment, as you know, to my own enjoyment, the Browns and Johnny Manziel had a rude awakening. The Bengals were ready for Johnny football. Johnny Manziel has a brutal start to his career, going 10 of 18, 80 yards, 2 interceptions, a 27 passer rating, sacked 3 times, all while the Bengals defense continuously are throwing up money signs, taunting him every chance they get. The Browns not only get shut out, but they have a 30 burger on them. In his next start against the Panthers, unfortunately he does get injured. Subsequently, that also makes him unavailable for week 17. He didn't play much, yet when he did play, it didn't look good. It looked awful. The Browns, who started 6-3, finished 7-9 down the road. So where did it all go wrong? Where was the charisma? Where was the athleticism? Where was the confidence? What happened to the Johnny football that we all knew in college? It was at this point that a lot of people began questioning his work ethic. Let's take you back to that Cincinnati game. Johnny Manziel was interviewed ahead of his first ever start in the National Football League. An interviewer, John Lynch, did raise some concerns about his work ethic. When John Lynch asks Manziel how he plans to prepare for his first ever start, Johnny responds with, he has put in the needed work this week. Emphasizing this week. Basically, once he feels like he's done enough, that's it. No more, no less. The interview didn't look good on Johnny's behalf, considering his history with continuously partying and the fact that he had a terrible loss that followed suit. Nate Burleson, who was a teammate of Johnny's in 2014, said 3 years later that he saw a lack of dedication and that he saw a guy that would rush out of the facility to go enjoy the fruits of his labor. Once practice is over, this guy is the first guy out the door. One anonymous Browns player called Johnny Manziel's rookie year a 100% joke. 3 separate people, 2 of them being his own teammates, questioned his work ethic. I don't believe that that's a coincidence if you consider the facts and if you consider the history and if you consider what actually transpired on the field. Not only were teammates beginning to turn on Johnny Manziel at this point, but so do some coaches. Kyle Shanahan, who was the offensive coordinator at the time, had seen enough and requested his release from the Browns, directly caused by Johnny Manziel. You're seen partying the night before damn near every game. Your thought process doesn't necessarily focus around football. With all things considered, on February 4th, 2015, Johnny does enter a rehab for alcohol. So it's a good first step. He's at least showing initiative, and the Browns are in full support. Clearly, his off-the-field life is taking a toll on him. Although it's a good sign, it doesn't stop the controversy from following. It is reported that Johnny threw a water bottle at a fan who wanted an autograph. Some argue that he was just being a heckler, but some argue that he was just being a fan that was excited to meet his idol. Either way you look at it, most people would just say, you know, another layer. It's another layer of controversy. What else is new? And although Johnny didn't necessarily take the first step to try to get clean and sober, sooner or later, the party life caught up to him. And I need to emphasize this, guys. He is not just drinking alcohol. He is doing a lot of other illegal things. And I really want to emphasize that. And I don't know if I was clear enough on that. His party life doesn't necessarily all revolve around alcohol. His party life does get the best of him again and in time for the 2015 season, because he could not beat out the aging Josh McCown for the starting position. But it's Josh McCown, so you know he's going to get hurt relatively quickly. In week 1, he gets injured and Johnny Manziel comes in. He has 3 turnovers and the Browns lose 31-10. It isn't until week 7 that Josh McCown re-injures himself. Despite Josh McCown getting hurt on 3 separate occasions, Johnny Manziel cannot do enough to nab the starting position away from him. So that's what's happening on the field. What's happening off the field? In October, Johnny Manziel and his girlfriend get pulled over by cops after fighting in the car, but nothing was charged at the time. In week 9, Josh McCown does go on injured reserve. Johnny Manziel starting, guess what the Browns do? They lose back-to-back games to the Bengals and the Steelers, being outscored a combined 61-19. Despite the ugly showings, it is confirmed by head coach Mike Pettin that Johnny will be the starter to finish out the season. Not even a few days go by before they go back on their word. Do you know why? Because during their bye week, after getting blown out On 2 separate occasions, Johnny Manziel is seen partying during the bye week. As a result, gets pulled yet again and replaced with Austin Davis. Thankfully for Johnny Manziel that Austin Davis isn't a great quarterback because he gets another chance. But it is reported that he gets injured with concussion-like symptoms and he is unavailable for week 17. It's one thing if you actually are hurt and you stay at home. You know, it happens. It's another thing to get sent home with a concussion, yet the night before the game, you are seen partying, gambling at casinos in Vegas. Need I remind you that your team is about to play their final game of the season? With every injury, all players are required to check in with their team on Sunday mornings. Johnny Manziel did not show up for this Sunday morning check-in. Combining that with the videos surfacing about him being in Vegas the night prior, Saturday night, this is bad. Like, if there was a poster boy for doesn't give a it is Johnny Manziel at this point. The Browns finished the season out at 3-13, and almost immediately Johnny is hit with a domestic violence case involving his now ex-girlfriend. This ex-girlfriend claims that Johnny was pulling her hair, threatening her life along with his own. With that, and with being concussed in Vegas, missing meetings and everything else, poor play, not being available, not having the great work ethic. The Browns, this is the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns, after 2 years, have had enough of Johnny football. They have decided that they are moving on. I want to emphasize that not only is this the end of his career with the Browns, this is also the end of his career with the NFL. 3 years ago, Johnny was on top of the world. 3 years later, he is out of the NFL completely. Johnny Manziel is also dropped by his agent Eric Burkhart. A little bit of saving grace for Johnny was that he was picked up by very famous agent Drew Rosenhaus on the condition that Johnny would seek treatment because clearly this guy is not well in the head. But as we know the story will go, Johnny does not follow through with this, and Drew Rosenhaus, the same Drew Rosenhaus that has been the agent of the likes of Terrell Owens, Chad Johnson, Gronkowski, Antonio Brown, that Drew Rosenhaus drops Johnny Manziel as a client, something he had never, ever done before. It's safe to say that at this point, Johnny Manziel's life is absolutely in a spiral. It is trajecting in an awful way. This is the beginning of the end for some people. Johnny's own father had been on record very concerned for his son's well-being. Quote, "I truly believe if they can't help him, he won't live past his 24th birthday." At this point, Johnny has sought help. He has sought treatment. He has tried to actually remove this part of his life. But now, it's become an addiction. The very same thing that he did for fun, he can't even stop at this point, even if he wanted to. And that's truly a scary feeling, to know that you are addicted to something and you can't for the life of you stop. When you take the football aspect out of the way, this is a young kid that just truly needed help. And if he didn't get help soon, even his own father thought that he would die. At a later date, his own attorney had stated that Johnny spent over $1,000 at a drug paraphernalia store. On May 6, 2016, Johnny caused $90,000 in damages to a Mercedes rental, and he failed to reimburse the company. Almost exactly a month later, he was sued by an LA mansion owner over causing $40,000 in damages. Something is absolutely wrong with him, and he just cannot stop. On June 16, 2016, the NFL decides to suspend Johnny Manziel for substance abuse. So even if an NFL team did give him a chance, he would have to be suspended for the first couple of games or so. And finally, on July 20th, 2016, he does get in an altercation that leads to a fist fight with another person. It's unclear if he was intoxicated at the time or not. The only saving grace is that more or less things do start turning around for him. Just a few months later, Johnny does decide to go back to Texas A&M to finish pursuing his degree. And over the next couple of years, he does stay out of trouble. He stays out of the spotlight, and he does work on getting himself clean. He works on himself getting sober. Something finally clicks in his head that things need to change. My family's worried about me. My fans are worried about me. I should be worried about me. Like, something finally snaps in him that things need to change. He does do some soul searching, and eventually he shows up 2 years later on Good Morning America in 2018, and in that interview is asking for a second chance from the people. Now in 2018, now that Johnny's a clean and sober man, he does still have ambition. He still says that he wants to play football again. One of his biggest regrets among everything that has happened over his life was that he let his off the field life ruin his childhood dream. It had cost him to play football professionally. And although the NFL was done with him, the CFL, after a little while, did give him a chance. In July of 2018, the Tiger Cats signed him to a 2-year deal, almost 3 years now since the Browns had released him. Although he doesn't play and gets traded to the Alouettes, he does eventually get his first start in August 3rd of that same year. He threw 4 picks and they lost 50-11. If you just take the step back though and look at the bigger picture, where he was 2 years ago versus where he's at now, starting in a professional football game again, it is something amazing. It is truly a great redemption, because just a few years ago your own father was damn near convinced that you were about to die. Despite the rough first game back, he is on and off the starter for the Alouettes throughout the season. My biggest mind blow, and I don't know if you guys are gonna feel this way, with everything that I've told you, the crazy rock star quarterback that we knew in the beginning of our story, right? To the guy that we know now, the guy who is clean, the guy that has gone through hell and back. At the end of the 2018 season, y'all, he's not even 27 years old. I'm 27 years old. This guy is not even 27. And yet he's gone through everything that he's gone through. The maturing level, the breakdowns, the releases, the fines, the suspensions, the domestic violence, everything. He's only 26 years old. I feel like I'm talking about a 40-year-old man. There was a slight hiccup for the CFL. Johnny Manziel was forced to be released by the CFL due to failing to meet with doctors. Apparently this was an agreement for Johnny Manziel to be eligible to play. He was supposed to meet with a doctor weekly and get some tests done every week, but it seems like he had missed a handful of games. So the fact that he missed these doctor meetings, and the fact that although he wasn't necessarily getting punished with drugs or alcohol necessarily, he was still gambling, something that the CFL is not a big fan of for their players to do. Because of the short leash Johnny Manziel was on, he was actually banned from the CFL. In 2019, he joins the new AAF league and signs with the Memphis Express midway through their season. Unfortunately for Johnny, just 2 weeks later, the AAF suspends all operations. In September of 2020, Johnny does announce his retirement from professional football. But, just like many professional athletes, doesn't end there. Just 3 months later, Johnny Manziel unretires due to his own words, boredom, and signs with the fan-controlled league. And a little bit of context about what the fan-controlled league is in case you don't know. It's a 7-on-7 game with new rosters every single week. Every play is called by the fans. As late as 2022, Johnny has decided to return as a player-coach hybrid, having his crazy party life, for the most part, behind him. At some points, you do kind of get where it came from. This is Johnny coming from a family that's absolutely wealthy. I'm not sure how he was raised. What I do know is that when people are wealthy, sometimes people feel like they can get away with things. Sometimes it gets the best of you. Johnny Manziel had a bad work ethic, at the very least when he was with the Browns. Who knows if he still had that same work ethic when he was at Texas A&M. The only difference was that he was so damn talented in college and other players couldn't keep up with him in college that it didn't seem to matter. So in Johnny's head, it kind of clicked. I can do this party life and I can be successful in football. But college and the NFL are two completely different beasts. Johnny Manziel always felt like he did just enough because he never had to do more. All in all, Johnny Manziel was his own worst enemy for a very long time. But I am glad that he got the help that he needed. I'm glad that he is now living a much more sober and healthier life. I'm glad that he at the very least got back to doing what he used to do. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for watching. Johnny Manziel's video is truly one of those crazy ones. If you compare it to RJ3, RJ3 had no issues off the field. We strictly talked about his on the field issues. Yet with Johnny Manziel, I feel like his on the field problems were at a minimum. Nonetheless, I do hope you guys enjoy. And if this is your first time on the channel, feel free to smash the subscribe button, hit that like, leave me a comment, let me know what you liked, what you didn't like. If I did say something wrong, you know, tell me. Just be respectful about it. All in all, I do love doing these things. I do love doing these presentations about players, and pretty soon I'll have a poll up about who you guys will want me to do next. Thank you guys so much for your support, and I'll be back later this week for my weekly pick'em. Until then, y'all, boy! Thank you guys so much for watching. Now, if you know anything about money, and I know nothing,
wowie,
and Manning Ward, and Manning, and if on February, what the